I'm Jen Piacenti with Fantasy Alarm, and I've got some DFS bargains for your Week 10. My bargain quarterback of the week, Jared Goff. He's 7,400 on FanDuel and 6,500 on DraftKings. The Rams face off with the Seahawks this weekend in a division rivalry game that Vegas expects to put up a lot of points. And, well, why not? Seattle's given up the most fantasy points to both quarterbacks and wide receivers so far in 2020. In Goff's last game, a loss to the Finns, he had 61 pass attempts for 355 yards. We saw Josh Allen have a get-right game versus the weak Seattle secondary last Sunday, and I expect Jared Goff, fresh off a bye, will have the same. I'd pair him with Cooper Kupp, who had 21 targets in Week 8, or Robert Woods, who has a very safe floor, or even Josh Reynolds, who's seen 17 targets over the last 2 games and is only 5,000 on FanDuel and 3,500 on DraftKings. Over at running back, you have to love the matchup versus Detroit for Antonio Gibson. He's 6,100 on FanDuel and 5,600 on DraftKings. Detroit has given up the most fantasy points to running backs this year, and should Washington get out to a lead or even keep this game competitive, Gibson should be money. Gibson has had 17 red zone rush attempts for 5 touchdowns this season, which makes him the team leader for scores with 1 more than Terry McLaurin. One note, it seems Gibson didn't practice Wednesday due to a shoulder injury, so should he continue not to practice or be a little banged up, J.D. McKissic is an excellent pivot at only 5,300 on FanDuel and 4,900 on DraftKings. McKissic had 14 targets and 9 grabs last week versus the Giants, in addition to his 3 rushes. Alex Smith has been announced as the starter for Week 10, and both McKissic and Gibson, a converted wide receiver, should benefit from the checkdowns. More wide receiver, you gotta get some Brandon Cooks. Cooks led the Texans in targets last week, including one 57-yard catch and run, answering DJ Chark's heroics last Sunday versus the Jags. In fact, Cooks has seen no less than 9 targets per game over the last 4 games, and yes, that is more than Will Fuller. I expect Deshaun Watson and crew should have no real trouble with the Browns, who've surrendered the 5th most points to wide receivers so far this season. Cooks is 6,300 on FanDuel and 5,600 on DraftKings. Want to get even cheaper? Okay, hang with me here. Chris Conley. Yes, DJ Chark had a big week last week, but he's likely to see a lot of Jair Alexander, who is the highest graded cornerback by Pro Football Focus. And that opens the door for another big-bodied receiver, Chris Conley. Conley caught 7 of his 8 targets last week for 52 yards. Keelan Cole, by comparison, was only targeted twice. Laviska Shenault is still a little banged up, and I can see some deep targets going Conley's way. Conley is 4,800 on FanDuel and only 3,000 on DraftKings. And finally, at tight end, Austin Hooper is back. Hooper saw 16 targets over the last 2 games he played, and now with no OBJ, he could see even more. Houston has surrendered the 10th most fantasy points to tight ends so far this year, and Vegas thinks the Browns-Texans game will have a lot of points. So go ahead and take a shot on a $3,900 Hooper on DraftKings and a $5,100 Hooper on FanDuel.